Hello and welcome to yet another video, and in this video it's something different because I'll be talking about these two lenses right here. They're both Fuji lenses, they're both Fuji kit lenses actually. One is the 18-55 and the other one is the 16-50mm from Fuji, and depending on which camera you get brand new, you will have different choices of selecting your own kit lenses, and usually with the higher up it's the 18-55 and the lower down is the 16-50 or the 15-45mm lens, but I do recommend the 16-50 over the 15-45mm lens because it's not an electronic zoom and it's easier to operate. But anyway, in this video we're only going to be focusing on these two lenses because I've been shooting with these two lenses for a little bit of time now, and I would like to really share my thoughts and opinion. So it's not really always objective here because I'll be talking about my thoughts based on my experience, how I shoot with these lenses, things like that. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So first I would like to actually start off with the usability, operational wise, pros and cons, and then leading into the pros and cons of the images from what I find, and also leading to the conclusion part on what I think about this lens, who's it for, what your priorities could be if you're looking for which one of these lenses. So first off, let's start with the usability and, well, the build quality and the operational side of these lenses. Obviously you pay a lot more for the 18-55mm being the XF series as well, and of course, a lot of those money is also going to go into the build quality. Obviously, it's not weather sealed, it's no WR on this lens and anything, but also for the price, I kind of wish that it was weather sealed, but kind of traded that for the build quality and for the aperture, the extra brightness aperture within this lens. It's the f2.8 to f4 versus 3.5 to 5.6. So if you're really in a lot of situations where you need to shoot extra big aperture, then this lens would be the way to go, versus this lens it's like 3.5, which is not that bright anymore. But most of the time I usually shoot landscape, streets and travel with this lens, so using f8, f10, f11 is usually the standard. So for me it doesn't really make that much of a difference, and especially when I have the lens, the 16mm f1.4 filming me right now, so if I need that extra low light, the 1.4 is also the way to go for me, and it's even wider. So for me, wider is a little bit better in most cases, but yeah, that's just for my use. But the build quality on here is definitely much better. As mentioned, the manual focus ring here is also a bit better. Like here is very, very slippery, and here you have some heft to it, which is nice if you're doing manual focus, especially on the newer Fuji cameras, which allows you to actually precisely manual focus more. So yeah, that's that if you're really into manual focus. If you're using autofocus most of the time, then you know you don't really mind having this ring at all. And the zoom ring, it's actually also a lot more loose and a lot more grippy in the same time on the 18-55. On the 16-50, it's still smooth, but it's nowhere as smooth as the 18-55mm lens. So if you're doing something like filmmaking or just slow, you know, zooming in and out shots, b-roll, things like that, then the 18-55 is better. And also if you're doing b-roll shots of zooming into like a certain subject, having that maximum aperture of f2.8 to f4 might benefit you more if you're shooting especially at the longest end of f4, versus this, the longest end is already 5.6, so your subject is not as isolated as much in terms of the background blur. And in terms of other usability, I really like the aperture ring here. I think I use the aperture ring here more on the Fuji cameras. Of course on a DSLR, even with those lenses with the manual aperture ring, I tend to use this more because, to be honest, dial is much faster if I'm shooting professionally, but if I'm just doing street photography, things like that, then I just prefer having this ring right here, and it's a really nice touch. But obviously you're paying extra for all of these build quality, and the metal construction of the body is also not the end. It's also this lens mount that is also metal. On the 16-50 it is plastic. The nice part about the 16-50 is it is very light. It is a very light lens, dropped it before and it survived. It's not one of those cheaply built plastic where you drop it and everything completely breaks, but it's still very light. The downside of the 18 to 55 millimeter when it comes to the operational side is it's a bit loud compared to the 16 to 50. If the aperture blades changes a lot when you're filming, then depending which mic you have, your mic might be able to actually pick it up. But if you're filming an interview like this, where I have a separate mic here and there's a receiver, then even if you manually switch your aperture, things like that, which usually don't always happen on set, but if you do, then you'll not catch those noises. But depending on the microphone, especially the stereo mics where they're more sensitive to noise on every corner of the room, then they might pick it up, because this is actually an older lens, I believe. So the focusing motor is more pronounced. It's still very silent, don't get me wrong. Compared to old DSLR lenses, this is really silent. But compared to modern lenses that focuses by wire and everything, this is actually a little bit loud, though fast, but loud. Just that split second. And also the aperture blade clicks a little bit louder as well. That is the downside that I have to say. And the 16 to 50 is actually a lot more silent in that regard. So if you're trying to focus something while in continuous autofocus, for example, in video, a lot of times this is actually next to silent, where if you're pulling extreme focus, whether it's with autofocus or manual focus, you might be able to hear some sound coming out of this lens. Obviously that's rare, but there is a chance, and you'll notice more than the mic actually. So that is something to consider depending on which microphone you use for your video productions or clips, things like that. So yeah, but otherwise there's not really much to compare about. Obviously the metal one is a lot heavier than the plastic one, as mentioned, and if you're into like travel, like extreme travel videos or travel photography, adventure, things like that, where you like, if you could save 100 grams you would, or even 50 grams, then the 16 to 50 millimeter is actually better in that case, because with a lighter lens and also a cheaper lens, you can also invest in another lens that you can carry with you, such as the 35 f2. I find that to be a really nice all-around lens as well, all-around prime lens for the Fuji system, and it's also weather sealed. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the operational side, the build quality, ergonomics, things like that. So now over into the image quality and the video quality side of things from these two lenses. Well, they're actually not as much different as I actually thought. When I first just shot with the 18 to 55, I was like, okay, it's going to be much sharper and everything is going to look much nicer. The flare will look better, and the sun starburst effect, which I love to shoot so much, will look more pleasant on the 18 to 55 millimeter lens. But when I got back home, I'm like, okay, they're roughly the same. It's just one of those perception thing that I find that I always hope that the 18 to 55 millimeter is better, and it is better, but just by slightly. If you're just looking for an all-around general purpose lens that you're not too picky about, like pixel peeping, then you're fine with both of these two lenses actually. You're really paying a lot more for the extra manual control, for the extra build quality, the metal mount, and you know, like that aperture that you're getting. But in terms of the optical quality, it's not too different. The flaring, for example, they are both roughly the same. The flaring is a tiny bit more pleasant on the 18 to 55, I'll tell you that, but it's nothing to write home about. If you're into like sun starburst effect, they're both pretty okay. It's nothing elegant, it's not the worst sun starburst effect you'll ever see, but it's just like, yeah, it gives you some sort of sun starburst effect, just not an elegant one. And when it comes to flaring again, the contrast on the 16 to 50 millimeter actually decreases ever so slightly, whereas the 18 to 55 millimeter lens actually holds up the contrast a little bit better. So there's that, but it's nothing to like really boast about, like it's 200 euros more expensive kind of contrast, you know what I mean? So yeah, the extra money really goes into the other area versus the actual optical quality, and it's really more down to the actual focal length difference as well that you're paying for. For the other kit lens here, the plastic fantastic here, you're paying, like, you're not paying, you're getting 2 extra millimeters, but you're also not getting as much on the end point, whereas you get the 5 extra millimeters on the 18 to 55. But yeah, the color fringing is okay, it's pretty control on these 2 lenses. I'm actually pretty surprised. If you compare the color fringing, chromatic aberration, things like that to the other kit lenses from the market, compared to the Canon, Nikon, things like that, the kit lenses, both kit lenses actually hold up pretty good in terms of the color fringing control. There will still be some, and you can trick the lenses to show some of the chromatic aberration, but it's nothing like you cannot fix in post. Of course, if you're a Lightroom shooter like me, you might have to fix it manually, but if you're a Capture One user, so I heard, you can actually just click a button and then it will just correct everything for you. So lucky you. But because I don't use Fuji as my main camera system, it's my street photography, travel photography camera, and just a camera that I usually bring to every event that's all around kind of thing, versus my Canon, Nikon. It's more of my professional line of cameras that I use, so I tend to prioritize my professional line more, and I don't feel like completely rearranging the catalog and presets from Lightroom into Capture One. So there's that. But in terms of image quality, it's not that much of a difference, really. And the flaws that you have more on here by ever so slightly, again, you can fix in post. You just spend like a few extra minutes in post. Of course, if you're taking like hundreds of images, then a few extra minutes becomes like a few extra hours. But you know, you have to ask yourself, is it really worth spending that bit, just a tiny bit extra money, just for a bit better contrast control, a bit better flaring control, and a bit better chromatic aberration control? But again, they're just like a hair bit better, at least according to how I shoot the camera and everything, but with the lenses and everything. And of course, in video, things like a bit of a distraction with flaring will be a bit more pronounced because it's a moving image, things like that. And you know, you're going to be looking at the image more, looking at that moving image more, and see the flaring move a little bit more. So it can be a little bit more distracting with the 16 to 50 millimeter lens. And also the fact that the contrast, well, the contrast you don't really see too much degrading, but you do see a bit more ghosting present in video and photo on this lens. So in certain lighting condition, like especially in the golden hour, you might have to take several more shots with this 16 to 50 millimeter lens, so to know that the ghosting didn't really ruin your images too much. But that's pretty much it, really. Not much to really add there. And just to the end of this video, I know this is just more of the general conclusion or general opinion based on my shooting. I don't want to go into detail about it because I'm not a pixel peep kind of person, but just to wrap things up, overall, I think it's also more to the point of like which focal length suits you and what you're going to be shooting with the lens. So if you're shooting a lot of things that is more in low light with the lens, then the 18 to 55 is going to be your move. And also if you're going to be in the environment where it's a bit harsher, things like that, then I have a feeling that the 18 to 55 is also going to handle it more, because there's the metal construction. Even the lens hood feels much better than 16 to 50. The lens mount is metal. Believe it or not, I have broken metal lens mounts before, so as plastic actually. So having the extra metal construction actually makes things a lot better. There are a lot of cars accelerating outside my window right now. Anyway, it's weird. So yeah, but if you're into like an extra wide angle kind of thing, where 2 millimeters, having that extra millimeters really matters, then you might like the 16 to 15 millimeter more. And with that cheaper price tag, you can invest in another lens like the 35 millimeter f2. So for the price of this, at least here in Northern Europe, for the price of this brand new, you can get this brand new and the cheaper version 35 millimeter f2. So yeah, for some people this might matter more because you are able to actually capture with different perspective and different look, and you know, the f2 is going to give you a much brighter image than the f2.8 and also a nicer blurry background than the f2.8. And yeah, there's that. But if you're also into vlogging kind of thing, then at least for me, when I vlog with a 16 millimeter. I find that, you know, the difference is like between doing that and kind of doing that. So if you're doing that, like really stretching your arm too much, then it could be like, you could get tired easily. So to me, the 16 to 15 millimeter really makes a lot more sense to get, and the optical quality is also not as different as I really thought between the two. So I could just go by with this, and most of the time I'm actually using my 16 millimeter f1.4, which is filming me, and the 55 to 200 millimeter lens in my camera bag actually. So those two lenses are pretty much my main lenses on my Fuji system anyway. So having this just to fill the gap, just to take some reference shots for me, just, yeah, it's just more than enough. So some of you will justify paying the extra price for the build quality, for the extra manual control, for the look, and obviously for that focal length and also the extra aperture you're getting with the lens. So is it worth it for some people? I think it's worth it, but it's definitely not worth to get both of these two lenses. So either get one, like one another, and then get another lens like the 35 or the 16 or the 14 or what other lenses you want. But it's, yeah, just pick one or another. So yeah, that has been this video. I know it's kind of vague, but I feel like there are just, perception wise, they're really different lenses, and I just feel like making this video where optically, if you care about the optical performance more, there isn't really that much of a difference. You know, you can just go with one of these two and get very, very similar results, and all the flaws, as mentioned before, can be actually fixed in post by just a few minutes. If you're really into editing, then it's just a few seconds really. So yeah, that's it for this video. If you have any questions about these two lenses or about anything else, please leave them down below and I'll do my best to answer. If you need a free photography guidebook, it's on my website. It's absolutely for free. You don't need to download extra things. You don't need to send me your emails or anything. It's completely for free. The link is down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, have fun shooting. Bye.